I'm here in the European Parliament with the President, Roberta Metsola. Thank you so much for joining us on DW News.
Thank you very much for having me.
President, you are going to be attending the European Political Community Summit in Chisinau in Moldova. This is this new idea to bring in sort of countries outside of the European Union and make a sort of political community of values. What are your priorities when you go to Moldova? What are you hoping to get out of this summit?
Well, first of all, I think it's not only symbolic and historic, but extremely important that we will be in Moldova. This was not a decision taken without thought and without, I think, what will be the strongest of messages to the Moldovan people that Europe is in Moldova and Moldova is at its heart. I was there a couple of weeks ago where I addressed a pro-European rally, 80,000 people chanting that they want Moldova not to be left alone and Moldova to be in Europe. And that's really, I think, what the European political community, which doesn't only put together the European Union member states, but the Western Balkans, other European countries that can come together and say, this is where we meet. My points will be continuing to have full support for Ukraine, especially in these difficult moments when they're under an increasing barrage of attacks on the capital. What can we do as a parliament from a legislative point of view in order for Ukraine to be able to go step by step towards starting accession negotiations, also for Moldova, but I will also spend a lot of time speaking to our Western Balkan colleagues.
You mentioned there support for Ukraine. We're seeing in the last few days there's been an exchange of drone attacks on Kyiv, on Moscow as well. Russia says that the Ukrainians are responsible for that. Europe is sending weapons to the Ukrainians. How comfortable are you with the idea that potentially European weapons might be used to strike targets in Russian territory?
I think anybody making this argument is forgetting the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine. This is not a conflict between two countries. This is one country invading another and taking part of its territory. And until Russia leaves Ukraine, then we are not going to stop supporting Ukraine. Today, we vote in the European Parliament on triggering the quick procedure, one would call it, for sending 1 million rounds of ammunition. This has two aspects to it. One, that Ukraine gets the help that it needs, and two, that our member states can ramp up the production also for their own home ground, because as we saw that the defense spending has decreased over the last few years and the geosecurity situation is what it is. We have managed pretty well so far. We have remained united. I think we can be proud of that unity, even though might not have been predicted or even thought possible a couple of years ago, but we did, and therefore I think that that's what the message can be as strongly sent as possible, not only from a political angle, but also from a facts-based, just as when we would agree and vote in the European Parliament on macro-financial assistance to Moldova, we would do this on ammunition to Ukraine.
This ammunition plan is called the ASAP.
ASAP.
A lot of people are really worried that it's being super rushed through, just heading out, the Parliament's voting on it, the Commission proposed it. The general public haven't really been consulted on whether they are willing to spend this money on defence. Do you think that's going to be a problem in the future? Because defence companies are going to ramp up their production, and I've heard from many of them say, we're not willing to ramp it down once we've done that.
Well, I see that argument, and I think we should engage whenever we have proposals, as I've been doing whenever I go to different member states and explaining what we're doing. We, let's say, have had to adapt to urgency as we did during the pandemic. So this is a procedure that a similar one was used for the digital certificates, the COVID digital certificate. At the time, there were concerns, is it being rushed through, is there? But at the end of the day, the European economies needed it and the European people needed it for Europe to open again. In this case, we're talking about a different kind of urgency. There are budgetary concerns, and in fact, the European Parliament is concerned about the viability of the multi-annual financial framework, which is why we have been saying that we need to create new own resources. We need a timeline on the disbursement of the current own resources that we have agreed to. When we look at the Recovery and Resilience Facility, how is that money being spent in each member state? Are we making sure that rule of law is being observed? So I think it was within that context that this Parliament's role comes in. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is helping a country that is fighting for our fundamental freedoms and values. How can we look away now?
You mentioned rule of law there. In Hungary, the Parliament's been discussing sort of pushing to get the rotating presidency of the European Union removed from Hungary so that it won't hold it. Hungary is saying, the Hungarian government has been saying that they're going to use that presidency to try and investigate rule of law within the European Parliament. Do you have any response to that?
Well, beyond the rhetoric that you've just mentioned, what I would say that, of course, this is a council decision. However, in the European Parliament this afternoon and tomorrow, there is a debate going on, and there will be text that will express the Parliament's concerns in that regard.
One final question. I have it confirmed from the former Vice President's office, Eva Kaili, that she, who's right at the heart of the Qatargate scandal, that she is going to try and ask for an audience with you personally to plead her case, to try and defend herself to you. Are you willing to speak to her? Will you hear her out? And what would be able to change your mind about that situation?
What we have gone through over the past few months has rocked this institution, and the investigations are ongoing, and that would be the comment that I would pass for any question that is asked of me in this case on the investigation that is ongoing. No request has reached me yet.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.